Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I am willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontifrac, in the house today. Probably someone that I would say we have a kindred shared spirit for many years, and we could have a conversation today about one of our true passions collectively, which is people and culture. David Liddle, welcome to the show. Short bio, and then we're just going to get right into it. So David, recognized authority in the fields of people and culture, leadership, and conflict management. Listen to these accolades. David, hold on to your hat. Named in the top 10 HR most influential thought leaders in 2024. It's also selected for, get this, the prestigious Thinkers 50 Radar in 2022, which means his brain is big. And it underscores his role as a transformational force in HR, people and culture, leadership, you name it. He's a very prolific writer and a keynote speaker. He's published 2 highly acclaimed books so far, Managing Conflict, which redefined dispute resolution. His second was Transformational Culture, and it says it all in the title. And he's hard at work. In fact, he may be having a little bit of PTSD from the writing episodes. He's got another book coming out January 2026, People and Culture, a practical guide for HR and leaders. We might even get into that today, David. But your career began really with a degree in race and community relations back in 1992, after which you led the pioneering inclusion and regeneration projects where you witnessed the damage unresolved conflict can inflict on communities. This experience helped him, David, to create one of the UK's first community mediation and restorative justice programs. So trailblazer indeed. He then, after that, quickly founded the TCM Group, which is a consultancy dedicated to developing fair, just, inclusive, sustainable, and high-performance cultures. What I love also about David, hopefully we get into this, is you published your People and Culture Operating Model, which really supports HR leaders and these 4 enablers: people, culture, strategy, justice. You can't get any more pillar-like than that. You're a fellow of the RSA, founder and president of the People and Culture Association, which is a worldwide phenomenon for people like me in the space. And outside of that, like me, a father of 3, a cyclist, and also an advocate for community initiatives. And we also share a very similar haircut. So, David, welcome to Leadership Now. Let's get into it. For those of you that either are in HR or think about HR or work with HR as a partner, what I've loved is that you have spearheaded almost single-handedly the nomenclature change from human resources to people and culture. And you've argued that people and culture is not just a new name for HR, it's this imagining, a bold imagining of a discipline. And I really wanted to get into that with you. Like, what has put your bee in a bonnet, I suppose, with the term HR? And where are we with that transformation? And then maybe other bits to it we'll get into.
Yeah, really great. Dan, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. And I think you spoke a little bit to some of my experience of why I think the time for change is now, and time for the status quo to be challenged. As a mediator, a coach, working with organizations, I've worked down in those basements, Dan, and I've listened to the stories, and I've listened to just one too many stories. Broken relationships, retributive systems, corrosive and combative ways for resolving issues for conflict resolution, and the damage, the trauma, the harm, the hurt, the sadness that it creates within our organizations. But moreover, when we feel these things and we're impacted by these systems, processes, cultures, institutional norms, actually undermines 2 or 3 really key elements of our organizations: performance, productivity, and value. Now, as leaders within our organizations, people leaders, executive leaders, there's a responsibility, a duty, if you will, to bring about an environment where we can perform at our best, we can flourish and thrive and grow and develop and do our best work. Now, the antithesis of that is the HR system, the legacy HR system of the past. It was designed for a sort of unitarist world in the 1990s, rules-based, structured, and systematic and systematized. And of course, the world of work has changed. It's your phrase. It's grey. It's no longer defined by rigid rules, rigid systems, binary processes. It's defined by the way we feel, the way we connect, the way we relate, the way we communicate through dialogue, engagement, learning, insight, creativity, connection, belonging, all of these amazing inclusion, amazing principles. You can't apply a rules-based system of the past, right, wrong, win, lose, attack, defend, that sort of retributive, reductive, in my view, corrosive approach, and expect people to come out of the other side of that to be their happiest, most high-performing, best. And that's the fire in the belly, Dan. That's what really drives me to think about how can we do things differently with people, purpose, values, justice, those principles very much at the center, because that then drives performance, that underscores productivity, and that enhances value in our organization. What an amazing role! What an amazing role for a people professional to be able to go into any boardroom, any executive suite, any office, depot, ward, clinic, anywhere in their organization, and say, I helped to create this space where we generated these amazing outcomes. And that, in my experience, isn't what HR is able to say when it walks into the room. In fact, when they walk into the room, and it's not the people, but people, they feel a tingle down their spine, fear and anxiety. And I think I speak to people professionals and I say, is that why you went into HR, to be seen as a threat, to be the policy police, to be the custodians of retribution and blame and punishment and sanction and fear and anxiety? No, that's not why I did this. Well, why did you do this? I came in to unleash the inner brilliance of people, to connect people and their motivations to the needs and objectives of the organization. But we get stuck with casework and all of these transactional problems. And so working together and honoring the work they do and respecting the work that they do, we then start to reimagine, well, what could it look like? And those are the conversations that just excite me. And I think I'm seeing exciting others, Dan. That's a wonderful privilege.
I love that. And so I'm gonna dig a little bit. And David, you and I are from the same vintage, and we've both spent, the better part of 30 years in the profession of culture, of people, of HR, and helping them see the light. So here's how I see it, and I'm curious how you see it these days. Those aforementioned people that got into the profession, did it, as you say, to inculcate that sort of culture of prosperity, of change, of people development, of organizational ethos in a way that's purpose-driven, and your 7 C's, which we'll get into later. However, one of the things I often say analogously is that the organization, in particular human resources / P&C, is very much like a football squad, like a soccer, if you're from North America team. And that football squad sort of has these 11 players, but more often than not, HR is viewed either like the center back or the keeper, and they're sort of playing defense.
Yeah.
Whereas perhaps what this organization or any organization needs is either a midfielder or a striker, someone that's able to sort of move around, be able to score a few goals every now and then, i.e. play offense. And I'm curious, why is it, to me at least, that far too many departments, I won't say individuals, but just the general ethos of a P&C or HR department feels like they're on the defensive, and to use your word, transactional, when indeed in this moment where we're at, in an evolutionary perspective of the organization, we need a thoughtful, humanistic, but offensive, if you will, in a obviously kind and purpose-driven way, leader and function.
That's a really interesting analogy and a really interesting point. In my book, People and Culture, I describe in the preface that the people function needs to become oracular. And what I mean by that is they become an oracle, a strategic seer in our organizations. Now, if they are down in the weeds and if they are case managing these cases where no one wins, it's retributive, it's a cycle of conflict, division, hurt, trauma, fear, impacting on productivity, retention, attraction of the top talent. It provides a cycle within HR. Now, I sometimes think HR think they benefit from that. I think they think that that gives their role purpose and function and meaning. And actually, in some organizations I've seen, I actually think it becomes part of the function of HR to perpetuate that cycle. And they actually perceive benefit for the function by seeing those problems occurring and acting as a defense because the board see the workforce as a threat.
Right.
If we see the workforce as a threat and we have a function to defend the executive from the threat, then we'll perpetually be in this cycle of division and conflict. Almost becomes self-serving to the HR function and also self-serving to other functions that are adjunct to HR. Maybe I might be talking about lawyers and others who benefit from the outflow of the problems. So if we repurpose the people function, if we start off by not thinking about our workforce as a threat, because if we see the workforce as a threat, it applies that defense methodology. If we see them as, I don't know, an opportunity. So an opportunity for us to learn, to listen, to create, to innovate, to support, to nurture, to grow, to develop. And all of these moments, these interactions within our workforce are moments of growth, learning, and insight. The oracular people and culture function is enabling and supporting and facilitating these interaction points. But moreover, they're gathering data from each interaction point within the workforce. Those data points then provide valuable insight in order to be able to help grow and shape and develop a positive workplace culture, feeding data into the executive as a key partner, giving the insights and the learning about what's working, the challenges, the needs of our customers, the needs of our consumers, the needs of our workforce, ensuring the organization is future ready and growing. And that data from HR can then be trusted. It's a truth. They provide a truth for our leadership and for our workforce. And suddenly positioning HR or the people function strategically as the most strategically important function in our organization. So I'm not sure about if it's defense or offense, or whether it's midfield, attack, or in the goal. It's about rising above and watching the game and understanding the game. And they are on the pitch playing the game, but they're also above the pitch watching the game and watching that ball move around and drawing learning, insight, and meaning from the movement of the players, the movement of the ball. So to an extent, the oracular people function is on the pitch, but actually they're above watching.
Ooh.
That makes sense. I'm just trying to use your analogy to make sense of my
I like
thinking.
that.
I don't know if that works at all.
I think you're talking about a higher level, right? Where, they're not in the grass. They're sort of like, whatever, 15,000 feet above or so. And they're having a bit of a panoptic view more so than being in the dirt or even playing defense. So then that actually segues nicely to one of those other adages you and I have come across for our last 3 decades or so. And that is HR needs a seat at the table. Okay. But then what? And so tell me a bit about not just that adage, but what you see as the function being this strategic entity to fuel the performance, the growth, the strategy of said organization.
There are some very divisive terms that sit within the lexicon of HR. I'm just a slight aside. I'm just about next week to go and run some leadership training at a very senior level in the British Army. And so we're doing some work and we kind of looked at all of the sort of militaristic terms that sit from the army in the boardroom. It's fascinating. 20 really powerful boots on the ground, that sort of strategic driver. I won't be able to remember them all now, Dan, but there's significant
command and control.
Correct, exactly. And when we start to look at those, what do they actually mean? Well, the HR function also has these phrases, not perhaps so militaristic, although sometimes they are. The business partner, the people of the business. If you're the business partner, against whom? So surely people partner, business is the people of the business, and culture is the defining feature of of the business, people and culture. And it's as simple as having a seat at the table. I think in many organizations, HR has sold its soul to get a seat at the table because it's being told you should have a seat at the table. At what cost?
Yeah.
You are the table.
Exactly.
You are the table.
That's why we love each other, because I've said that. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
People should be sitting around listening to you, but because you want to have this and you strive to the seat at the table, and it represents the higher echelons of your career development as a CHRO, that you've got that seat at the table. What did you give in order to be able to get that? Are you a true partner at the table, or do you provide that support, that defensive function, still risk mitigation? So when the people function becomes that table and providing those strategic connections with the chief people officer and other C-suite leaders as a true partner, feeding in the knowledge and the insight and creating the places for us to thrive and flourish. You don't have to seek that seat. People will seek you. And I'm a big fan of clusters and hubs, and to an extent, that sort of idea of we all sit. People, when did we last sit around a table and make corporate decisions? Corporate decisions are not being made around the table. Yeah. We are making them in the spaces. We create moments and spaces. And that, I think, is really exciting for the people function, to create moments and spaces that really drive the strategy, the objectives, the purpose, the value within our organizations.
I want to get into AI because it's an elephant in the room. But prior to that, it feels to me that the organization, in particular, because of where HR sits, ideally in that sort of centrifugal hub, if you will, the HR, the profession, the unit has had to deal in the last 5 or 6 years with so many different issues, from not only the pandemic, but you've got social justice movements, you've got remote work trends, so we can work from home. Now you can't. You're being hauled back into the city if you're working for Deloitte or whoever. You've got climate concerns. You've got political concerns. You've got DEI, EDI, call it what you will these days, but it's in, it's out, it's in, it's out. They're all converging, it feels like. And so more now than ever, in my humble, bald-headed opinion, David, the PNC strategist has to come to bear, has to be there, because of where we've come from, what's going on right now in the tsunami of change. But then again, as we'll talk about in the next question or the next theme, is AI. So I think there's this revolution happening / evolution inside the org. So from an organizational culture perspective, where is your head today, and where these senior PNC leaders are? What is it that they're getting right, and what is it they're getting maybe wrong that they have to be thinking about?
It's a really great question. I'm kind of when I was writing the book, I sort of thought about this. The model that you talked about, those 4 dimensions: people, culture, strategy, justice, and of course value, which sits there as another dimension. And as I was developing the model, Dan, I suddenly started to add lists on talent acquisition. Then we had ED&I, and we had that and that. And suddenly the model started to grow arms and legs and bits popping up all over the place. And so my graphic designers designing these models, and they couldn't keep up with the bits I was bolting on. And then now again, I'd read another blog and I'd read another piece of research from McKinsey. I thought, oh gosh, I need to add this on. And I looked at it and I said, you know something, this is so complicated. How can we ever make sense of this? What is really, really important? What's the fundamental central truth of what we're trying to create in our workplaces? And it's about creating a great people experience where the needs and motivations of our people are aligned to the needs and motivations of the organization, to create coherence and connection, to drive the organization forward today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, to create that success. So what I started to do is I've bolted on all of these agendas, created complexity, then slowly I remove them. And as I removed them, I felt a sense of freedom. And what I was saying is, we've always lived in volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous times. Maybe they are those now, but if you went into the 1970s, 1980s and said, oh, these were really simple times, someone would look at you, this is crazy. These are not simple times. These are the most complex times we've ever lived in. So we are always in volatile VUCA times. So perhaps, and what I find within HR, and again, this is a real challenge for me, is the volatility, the uncertainty, that complexity, what results in another policy. So what we see is the output is more documents, more rainforests being cut down to pay for all of these policy frameworks. And so we're constantly building policy frameworks, which feel to me like they take us further and further as though they're a ladder, and we're climbing the ladder away from the real truth, the central truth of our workforce, which is the needs and goals and motivations of our people. And how do we harness, enable, and support those? So by taking out I'm not ignoring all of those elements, by the way, they're important. But they are important because we help us to create the spaces that enable our people to do their best work. So I create a new centres of excellence. I'm a big fan of the centres of excellence, but AI centres of excellence, which we'll talk about, culture hubs. I have a resolution centre of excellence, which is about dedicated to resolving conflicts and industrial relations and employee relations issues in the workplace. So we can have well-being, engagement, inclusion focused. They exist, but they become centres of excellence, which are cross-functional, with the people function focusing on really harnessing and aligning the people experience and the needs and strategic objectives of the organisation. And there's a clarity and a centrality to that, which I think is powerful.
So where does it emanate, though, before AI? Is it this sense of we need to shackle those that are in the bottom 10% because there are problem children? Is it because HR wants that power? So more rules and regs and policies and procedures that are defined must be enacted. We're in, we need that. We have to have that. Otherwise, look out. Is it because HR is in charge of the annual employee engagement survey, so they want to make sure that they can statistically, numerically identify where the org is at and if they're in line or out of line? Like, how do you see this?
So where I started really working with HR and leadership and the culture space was when I went in and said to organizations, your grievance procedure, your disciplinary procedures are the most pernicious, corrosive, divisive, destructive, harmful procedures in your workplace. You'd be better off saying to all of your managers, make it up as you go along, get better outcomes than following the processes which you've put in place. And they went, whoa, these are the cornerstone of our work. So, okay, well, let's not go to anarchy. Let's put something in called a resolution framework, which is an integrated people policy, which actually kind of connects the dots. And we're using a different decision-making system rooted in transformative justice, dialogue, compassion, engagement. And suddenly people's lights started to switch on and got very excited. And we've won awards with Burberry and Next and big banks for the introduction of this. So I don't think it's that they have a factor that they want to pursue these different aspects. And I think it's because no one's actually stood up and shown them that there is an alternative way for people and culture to operate. And I think we've got the sort of the legacy functions, the legacy operating models, which have been developed, with great people, Dave Ulrich, and there are many others. We see Perry Tim's work, and I honor the work and celebrate that. But if you look at the operating models that have come up through this since the turn of the millennium and over the last 20 years, I don't want to disparage them, but I don't think they are fit for purpose. And I don't think they are challenging the status quo and challenging the mindset, the language, and the behavior in the way that we want to in our organizations. And to me, that's the space I think we're operating in. We hold up a mirror to the people function and say, this is what it looks like when we apply these approaches, and then a map which says this is where we can begin to move towards if you wish. If you don't wish to, you can oppose it, you can challenge it, you can resist it, you can embrace it. It's not for me to judge or determine whether you should do any of those things. I simply offer you an alternative way of thinking about the way that you do people and culture as a people function. And it's not saying my model is the right model, but people are starting to open up to those conversations, and that's hugely exciting. I interviewed 30 chief people officers and loads of chief execs for my book, and they are just doing the most incredible work, but they're doing it in isolation from someone actually validating it and saying you're following a blueprint or a structure or an operating model. And I think that's, there's some great work that's being done, but the time for really rip up the old and scrap it probably too much, but standing on those shoulders and saying it's time to step up and go to the next level. That's where I think we're at.
What a wonderful segue, because maybe now is that time for HR P&C to step up, to level up, because of the swift introduction of artificial intelligence into our organization. So I'll take a step back, and you may or may not agree. We'll find out. But historically, where we've seen HR play in the technological advancement space in the organization is more Robin to Batman, or even just ancillary to primary. And what I mean by that is far too often you have the IT, the tech team, the tech strategy, whatever you call them.
Yeah.
They are the ones who are implementing tech. And so whether that's collaboration platform, an IM platform, ERP, whatever, they're in charge. And we're a stakeholder at times, HR that is. Like we might sit on the table, we might sit on the committee, whatever. Now, with AI being, it is one of those game-changing, culture-changing instances that we're only going to get once in a career. And here we are. Is this the time for HR and P&C to step up with AI knocking on the door and saying, look, this can be our superpower to authentically help the culture change, help the people develop, help us with our effectiveness, our efficiency, all the stuff that finance wants as well from a productivity performance perspective. Now is our turn to put on the cape, and we will lead the AI inclusivity of technological and procedural change, with other stakeholders seeing how it's going to be playing out in our organization under our watch. Tell me a bit about your thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. So last year I launched my ACE, the AI Centre of Excellence, ACE Global, specifically to create spaces for organisations to have these conversations. And again, in the book, I talk about these new centres of excellence, the Culture Hub, which is a cross-functional body responsible for helping to shape, define, develop, and embed the culture. The Resolution Centre I referenced a moment ago, and another one is ACE, the AI Centre of Excellence.
Right.
To your point about leveraging, so this isn't tech, this is insight. You don't have to code, you don't have to be able to do anything. You can just, I could be creating a custom GPT quietly now while we're talking about helping to act as a co-pilot for this conversation. It's so easy to do. It's beyond tech, it's purely on insight. The challenge, I think, for HR is how do we leverage that? I talked about that oracular function. Well, what better way for leveraging the role of AI than helping us to gather and interpret and assimilate all of these data points to tell a story, provide a narrative with those data points. But I'm going to go back one step, if I may, because as we're starting to see the rollout of AI at scale and at pace in organizations, one thing that concerns me greatly is a lack of an overarching strategic narrative, governance, and scrutiny. And I'm looking at that through the lens of justice, inclusion, fairness, equity, well-being, employee engagement. Sorry, Dan.
Ethics,
correct. The integrity and the morals. And once it's built and it's into that spaghetti and the black box, it's built forever. It's very hard to unbuild it. This is the moment. This is the absolute moment where the people function can help to build AI platforms which are trusted universally across our workforces and across our society. Because my 16-year-old son is going to be coming out of college. He's just starting college this week. But he'll be coming out of college at a time where the labour market potentially could be being decimated as he's coming out into professional services, if that's the route he decided to go. Now, that's a fact that we should all be thinking about. Is the AI there to replace jobs or to enhance jobs? But unless we start asking these questions today, like actually right now, then it will run away from us and it will be built into the system. So to me, the people function is about moving away from the concept of this as tech. It's not tech. Tech required coding and complexity, and it was difficult to wrap your head around. This is not that. This is accessible and able to be utilized. The question then moves much more into your question of integrity, justice, fairness, and designing out heuristics. As soon as we design, look at us. We're two men sharing a. I think it's a very special haircut, by the way, that we have. I think it deserves affirmation and accolade. Nonetheless, it puts us in a particular demographic. If you and I sat down and started to design an AI, unless we were particularly good at thinking outside of ourselves, we are likely to design that AI in that demographic. Now, we have power, we have authority, we have resources, so we are likely to be the people who design the AI. Are we going to deliberately go and knock on other people's doors who don't look like us, don't think like us, don't talk like us, indeed people we may actively disagree with? So what better role than the people function in this new space to be going and knocking on doors and bringing people together? So this is where our people function needs the skills of negotiation and influencing, mediation and coaching, supporting, enabling, driving, promoting, encouraging, nurturing, generative, supportive dialogue within our organizations. Because when we create those spaces, and you and I who have the power, the resource, the privilege, the follicles or less thereof to be able to drive that, we can then bring our people functioning to support and enable that to operate with the best intentions of people. If we don't do that today, now, right now, here, then we will miss that opportunity, and that opportunity will go, and it's going to be very hard to put that toothpaste back in the bottle if we don't do it. And what a great, if HR stands at an inflection point, which it most certainly does for various reasons, and you cited some of those earlier, this probably is one of the greatest drivers of that inflection point. But it could be so amazing, and it is so amazing. I love AI. I think it's just phenomenal. But one should be very, very, very concerned about the direction it would go in if it's not checked and developed in the way that I'm talking about. So the AI Centre of Excellence does that, and that will be chaired by the Chief People Officer and the CTO, working collaboratively to create that space within our workplaces.
And we stay on this just for a second. You've touched on a couple of things for me that requires your input and counsel and wisdom. And that is, if AI is at the boardroom or the C-suite level taken as the opportunity to merely and solely cut costs and improve EBITDA or profitability, then perhaps that's not where we want to be as an organization, and HR or P&C should step up. Because why? Well, I start looking 3 to 5 to 10 years out. I see things like, to your point with your 16-year-old and my 22, 20, and 18-year-old, when they finish up their degrees, will there be a job for them? Now, there will be jobs, but if the intent of AI is to, I guess, replace many of those first jobs or the remedial low skill jobs in which, when you and I were younger, would learn a hell of a lot from other people, and that became our quote Ruby wisdom over time as we now enter our Ruby era, I call it, then I worry about the organization longer term if there's not as many young people, let alone as many young people who are learning. And I'm not anti-AI, I am pro-AI, but I think it's HR's responsibility to be figuring out what's the ethical way in which we'll use it in the organization from a people and culture perspective. Is it to replace, to your point? Is it complementary? Is it a little bit of both? But what are the, I guess, cultural guardrails? Tell me a bit about how you see HR playing that part if they're owning the AI COE.
That's a great question. I think we had the similar conversations around ESG and other factors, and it's really interesting. I'm a big fan of servant leadership principles, transformational leadership, inclusive leadership, and all of these leadership principles within our organizations requires a sort of inversion of the pyramid. And it requires us to think differently about the way that we serve the needs of the organization. Yeah, it seems to me that when we're looking at AI, we've just reinverted the pyramid from this back up to this, and we're cutting these bases out. Now, one of the things I've done with, and again, this might be a small example, but I offer it to you as an example. So I run a big consultancy. So people come to me with questions all the time of how should we do this? How can we support that client? How can we develop this program, this strategy? So I've created a custom GPT, which is an assistant. It's got all of my knowledge, all of my books, everything I've ever created in it. And it just means that the first question that people ask can be into the GPT. So the second question they ask is when they come to me, they say, David, I've got a 2-page strategy document here. I've worked it through. We've used the AI. And what that means to me as a sort of 54, but nearly 55-year-old executive is it means that I'm not getting lots of questions about starting from a blank sheet of paper. Now, that means I can start thinking about how do I manage my life as an executive? Can I start to reduce the amount of time I spend at work? Would it not be better for us to kind of invert that pyramid and say, actually, as the generation which is coming through the workforce and starting to think about its needs and work, would it not be better for me to think about me spending less time at work and using the AI to help that to happen than me cutting off graduates and talent coming into the organization and removing the chance to build succession planning? Therein lies one of the first nails in the coffin of the enterprise, because if we cut off our talent and our succession planning, how will we grow? It might be a short-term win on the EBITDA, but over the longer term, it can only result in doom. And ultimately, then the AI, the agents are running the business. We might say, well, we'll have an agent makes 20% of decisions. Well, then 18%, 15%, 10%. Well, then the AI is running the organization. And what's the point of all of us? So I would invert the pyramid and say, actually, rather than looking at the AI being a way to replace inbound talent and cutting costs at that level, how can I make managers and leaders have more time for themselves and their families, which we all need to be doing a bit more of? So it might be a trite or glib answer to your question, and forgive me if it is, but it's like rethinking and repurposing that as an opportunity. Because if we cut off the supply chain into businesses, that I think anyone who is right thinking in leadership and people space should be deeply alarmed and troubled and extraordinarily worried by cutting off the talent pipeline with AI. That's where we start to go into the point of where's this going to end, and I think that would be a huge tactical error on the part of any leader or people professional thinking about utilizing the best of AI. Use it so you can get a bit more time on the golf course. That would be my best advice.
So related but tangential is your work and your thinking, partially because I wrote a book about it as well, and I want your thoughts. is about sort of the rethinking of success from profit to purpose. And so, as you've written, you believe that profit and power are not the hallmarks of success, but that really a thriving organization has to align that culture with the sense of value of what their employees feel, their customer, the community, stakeholders, not just shareholders. So I love your writing. But as AI now is becoming more and more an integral part of a business, is it also another time for HR to step up and say, well, what is our purpose? Is our purpose, ergo, to use AI to cut those jobs and to increase EBITDA? Or in fact, are we going to be sort of a humanistic AI organization where it is complementary? So tell me how purpose and what evolution we need to be thinking about from the definition and application of an organizational purpose does HR need to lead so that this train doesn't leave the station down the wrong track, my friend?
No, I completely agree. I think, again, we can go backwards there and ask if there was an intentional and deliberate conversation going on in our organizations to help shape our thinking around the application of AI and the ultimate purpose it's seeking to achieve. I could be missing something here, Dan, and I'm not present to a lot of those conversations in those boardrooms, but I ain't hearing that.
Me neither.
I'm not hearing those conversations. I'm not even hearing the echoes of the conversations coming up on social media feeds and LinkedIn or on papers that you might sort of find somewhere buried away. I'm not even hearing the echoes of those conversations. So I think if you're having the conversation and your decision as a business owner, business leader, and with your shareholders and other stakeholders is that you want to use AI to enhance the EBITDA, to reduce headcount and drive the business forward. And that's a deliberate, intentional decision that's been driven through discourse, it's been examined, the business case, that's your strategy, then that is your strategy. I'm not here to question whether that's your business strategy and that's the right way forward. That is your business strategy, and you have to do the best by your shareholders and your other stakeholders. And it would be entirely incorrect for me to even form any form of view or judgment over whether that was right or wrong. when you haven't had that intentional and deliberate conversation, though, and that hasn't happened, and you are accidentally walking blindfolded across a precipice and then just hoping for the best. And then when it starts to kind of get difficult, say, oh, we're just doing it for the shareholders to cut costs, becomes reactive and it's reactionary, and it becomes almost we're excusing the things that we've done because we failed to have the conversation. Then I think one does have the ability and should challenge that. And to challenge it, one speaks out and says, now, do something now to have the conversation. I would never judge what an organizer, how the organization measures the strategic value, its shareholder value, of course, its role, relationship in our society. And to stakeholders, there's not a one would, as a mediator, I know one does not judge, and nor is it my place. But I do worry deeply that those conversations, that discourse is not happening. And I still think there's a lot of mysticism and confusion around AI. And so what that means is I think either bad actors can run with it, or people will run with it who have an agenda, which might be the one that you've described. And then ultimately they say to HR, right, you are instructed to deliver this agenda. You weren't part of the conversation. You weren't in the room when the conversation happened. That is a big fail. That is a big fail. And I think anyone in HR or the people function should be very, very concerned about that.
Spot on, mate, as we say, spot on. Okay, last question, if you still can stick around. I know we could probably talk for a few hours, to be honest. Long form podcast is my next one with you, David. We'll go deeper into this. But if we take a sail on your 7 C's for a second, yes. let me outline the 7 C's for everyone, and yes. Then I have a more provocative question, I suppose, to end with. So your 7 C's is really one of your centerpieces of many things that you've written, and you have been quite a thought leader on. Courage, common purpose, as we just spoke about. Communication is the third. Compassion, curiosity, connection, and collaboration. I love those 7 C's. Also, because my 3 kids are called Claire, Cole, and Kate. Big fan of the C's. Big fan.
We've got 10 C's now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So tell me a bit now about those 7 C's in the context of organizational culture, because really the 7 C's is about your transformational culture. What is it that we need to do so that those 7 C's, as we sail, we're not in choppy waters? Like, there's something that I would love to hear from you that is the 1, 2, or 3 things that we've got to be doing in the next 18 months to mitigate the tumult from the high seas, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to an extent, they are designed. They're the sail on the boat to help you to navigate through the choppy waters. So to an extent, it's not necessarily about creating calmer waters. They're helping us to manage the choppy waters. And I think, so I often think of the 7 C's as the energy source of a transformational culture, a culture which is driven by a sense of purpose, people, values. So what does that mean? What's the energy source for that? The energy source for that is our 7 C's. They become our leadership and management capabilities. They're helping us to navigate through the storm, to manage the storm, to create those connections within our organizations, to be able to deliver our leadership and management in a way which is credible and trusted and seen as being and recognized as being supportive in the needs of the organization. It provides the energy source to connect the manager and the leader to the workforce, rather than the disconnection that we see when we're in those choppy waters.
I like
so
that.
It's, to me, they become when I'm working with organizations to develop leadership capabilities or competencies, whatever they want to describe them, those 7 C's become embedded in. The challenge I see in a great many organizations is we're just not developing those skills. They're seen as soft skills. They're not seen as critical, fundamental business skills that we need at the moment. Compassion is seen as a sign of weakness. It's seen as a sign of giving up. It's seen as something that isn't aligned to the business strategy. So how do we ensure that being compassionate, being empathetic, being kind, being generous is seen as aligned to the organization's strategic objectives? So when we do that, and those 7 C's become built in and baked into the organization's capabilities, competencies, the development programs for our leaders, become a shared narrative, that's when we start to be able to move from managing people and having power over our people to enabling our people and sharing power with our people. And that's true distributive distributed leadership. And when we're able to distribute leadership across the workforce, and we're able to share the power across the workforce, then we start to see incredible opportunities for engagement, learning, insight, growth, creativity, and connection across the workforce. So it's about role modeling the behaviors that align to our values to get the very best from our people, to help them thrive and flourish and be the best of themselves every day.
Whatever that may be, right? Not everyone has to be at their best. It's just whatever that day's best brings.
Whatever that day. And also, if you're having a bad day is okay as well. Exactly. So whatever that means to you. And if you're having a bad day today, what can I do to help you have a good day tomorrow? So one of the examples I give is, again, I'll just use it as a really short example to illustrate the point. So I do a lot of management development, performance management training for managers. And you start off a conversation in a performance management training, say, what's the most important question that you could ask when you're running a performance conversation with an employee? And all the hands go up, and it's like, what are your objectives? How have you achieved your objectives? What have you done well today? What's been challenging for you? And you get lots of questions from within the room. And I say the most important question that you can ask as a leader when you're managing performance is, how as a leader am I performing? And people say, I think you kind of missed the point a little bit, David. You're managing performance.
Yeah.
I haven't missed the point. What I'm doing now is I'm seeking feedback. So those 7 C's, I'm seeking feedback against those. How have I done? I'm role modeling a non-defensive response to critical feedback. I'm valuing that feedback. I'm seeing it as an opportunity to learn, to listen, to engage. And now I can share feedback with you. So the feedback, the performance becomes a conversation, a dialogue. It doesn't didactic. It's not an expression of authority over or command or control over. So we can bring this to life through how we handle change and conflict. In the case I've shared there, how we might handle performance as an everyday function within our organizations. So creating those connections, that sense of, I put a post on LinkedIn yesterday called Fly the Why. What's the why? We can connect people around the why. What's the why? If we understand your why and my why, that creates an unbreakable sense of commonality and common purpose. We can move mountains when we start to achieve that. So those are just some examples, I think, of how our leaders can bring this to life. And compassion is not a sign of weakness. Compassion is a sign of the greatest strength that any leader can bring. Subcontracting a problem to a broken procedure is not a sign of your courage. Engaging in that conversation and leaning into that discomfort and listening to really understand the needs and goals and the feelings, the F word of work, feelings, snot and tears, I can't do it. It's like understanding where people are coming from and their emotions and connecting with them in a really powerful, that drives the business forward. And that resolves the issues of performance, productivity, and value. If we want to drive performance, productivity, and value, we have to put people, values, and culture at the number one strategic priority every day for the rest of time. It has to be number one.
David, I've just decided that you and I should have a weekly 45-minute podcast radio show and just riff. I think this is what our destiny lies for us.
I would love that, by the way, but I'm not sure whether anyone else would, but I would love that.
If Stuart or Des or Monica or Miko are listening, I think they just need more Thinkers 50 radar people like you and I on the Thinkers 50 radar list. That's what they also need. This has been glorious. Thank you so much for your time. The firm, of course, is the TCM Group. Your next book, January 2026, is People and Culture, a practical guide for HR and leaders. David, where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. So find me on David Liddle on LinkedIn. The TCMgroup.com is our website. We've got a bunch of websites, but the TCMgroup.com. And if you want to email me personally, then I'd love to hear from you. It's simply david.liddle. Liddle is like little, but with D's instead of T's. david.liddle@thetcmgroup.com. And yeah, I love hearing people's questions and thoughts and reflections. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we must do this again. Maybe when the book publishes, we'll do a follow-up for certain. But thank you. Just incredible layers of thought, of depth, of thinking, but also of practicality, and that's keen. You're not just out there thinking; you're doing and helping so many leaders, not just in P&C and HR, but leaders generally, making this and their organizations a better place to work. So, thank you for what you do in our world.
That's lovely to say. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much, Dan, for having me and giving me an opportunity to share some of those thoughts. Thank you.
More to come. Okay, folks. Well, thanks for watching or listening to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract. David Liddle in the house, just a champion of not just HR, but people and culture.